If you study the nighttime sky, it won't take long for you to discover that the stars seem to drift across the sky. That's not because the stars are racing around us, but because of the way the Earth spins on its axis. But there's one star, Polaris, or the North Star, to which the Earth's axis is in direct alignment. And for that reason, it doesn't appear to drift the way other stars do, making it a natural compass. Ancient sailors used that star to guide their ships, but it required periodically checking to make sure they were still on course, and it also required their ability to adapt to changes. This morning's description of the early Christian church is a sort of North Star for Christianity. So we use it to check ourselves and to help us stay on course. It's a description of a community where people shared what they had, where no one was in need, and where people gathered each day to break bread together. And if we're honest, it almost sounds like a fantasy, because we know life isn't always like that. Churches aren't always like that. People aren't always like that. And if we're really honest, we aren't always like that. So what are we supposed to do with a passage like this? Is this something we're meant to copy exactly? Or is it something we're meant to learn from? More than an account of what our spiritual ancestors believed, it's a record of what they did and how they behaved. Faith wasn't just something happening in their heads. It was something happening in their relationships. They shared meals. They prayed together. They learned together. They built lives together, and that's important because sometimes we think that faith is simply believing the right things. But here it looks like belonging and showing up for one another. Our text describes a sense of awe that overtook everyone because of the many wonders and signs that occurred. We might imagine those wonders to be dramatic miracles, and maybe there were those things. But I think it was likely that there were deeper, quieter miracles taking place. Like people learning to care for someone other than themselves while still trying to survive in a cutthroat dog-eat-dog world. People crossing social boundaries instead of reinforcing the walls that separated them. People choosing generosity over anxiety of not having enough to share. That sort of community is its own kind of miracle. But then there's that part of the text that feels so troublesome. You know the part I'm talking about. The part that says they had all things in common, they sold their possessions and shared their proceeds with whoever was in need. You might say, well, that was a different time. It's not really practical today. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's not something we're meant to copy exactly. The text isn't meant to be a checklist or a one-size-fits-all description for churches. Maybe instead it's meant to describe a shift from what's mine to what's ours. A shift from how do I protect what I have to how do we make sure everyone has enough. That sort of shift in perspective was radical thinking for its day. And it's just as radical today. So even though selling our possessions may not be practical today, we're still faced with the questions, do we belong to ourselves alone, or do we, in some deep and holy way, belong to each other. Friends, we should never forget that what we do with what we have reveals what we believe about one another. Then there's the part of our text that describes joyful daily communal meals. And again, that might not be practical. I'm not sure I could sustain a joyful attitude if all of y'all showed up at my doorstep each day around dinner time. But maybe the text can be a reminder that the Spirit shows up in the ordinary daily rhythms of life. In homes, in meals, in coffee shared with a friend or enjoyed alone on the porch or patio. Not just in the big moments, but in everyday life. Sometimes we think we need something big and extraordinary to be the church. But this passage suggests that holiness can simply look like a table, that faith can look like a meal, and that love can look like making room for one more person. Now, it's important to say that the community described in this morning's text wasn't perfect. If you keep reading Acts, you'll see arguments and bickering over everything from the inclusion of Gentiles to the neglect of food distribution to the Greek-speaking widows. They didn't get it right all the time, and neither will we. So this isn't a picture of perfection. Remember, it's a spiritual North Star, a guiding star. It's not saying be exactly like this. It's saying move in this direction toward this kind of life. So maybe we aren't called to recreate the early church. Maybe we're being asked what it would look like for us here and now to take one step in that direction. What would it look like to not just be friendly, but to be truly connected? What would it look like to be a little more generous with our time, our resources, and our attention? What would it look like to create spaces where people feel like they actually belong, not just welcomed, but valued? Because the truth is, the Spirit is still at work, still forming communities, still drawing people together, still inviting us into lives of generosity, connection, and joy. This morning's passage from the book of Acts isn't locked into the past. It's still unfolding, at least when people choose to live this way. So maybe it begins with the quiet shift from me to we, from believing the right thing to belonging together. Because in the end, the good news is not just that we can believe something about God. The good news is that we're becoming a community shaped by God's love, a community where no one is alone and no one is forgotten. Amen.